welcome to the finale discussion for Falcon and Winter Soldier Season 1. And yes, it is conceptually a season finale, which we're going to dive into in just a couple of minutes after I warn you all that yes, this will feature spoilers. Spoilers abound in these weekly conversations, so you need to have watched the finale. That's right, today's episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier before joining me here, because we're going to give everything away. This is going to be a full spoiler conversation. I have loved doing these with you every single week. This is the season finale of one of the biggest shows in comic book history, and it felt like it. It was quite a bit of show. Let's get into it. As you all know, I name each episode my own title. I called this one And the Kitchen Sink. This episode was all of the things. This episode was gigantic. This episode featured many different arcs concluding. This episode, many different characters launched from. This episode featured a lot of comic book visually accurate moments, as well as some original to the MCU accurate moments that reflect our world in really beautiful ways. I am, as I get older, more and more political. I am, as I get older, more and more invested in the future. As someone who wants to have kids and them have a place in it, I'm very invested in them understanding the difference between doing things because that's the way they are and doing things because that's what's right. This show embodies doing things because that's what's right in a really wonderful way. I was very impressed, knowing full well where this show was going to land, with it sticking the landing. You need to have Sam Wilson feel like he has earned the moniker of Captain America. He needs to feel that in his heart. He needs to, when he says, "I'm Captain America," believe it because of what that symbol represents to both Americans, African Americans, Sam himself, people that won't agree with him, people that won't see him as Captain America, that need to be educated on why they're wrong. He needs to believe it so much that it's an undeniable force. And seeing that arc play out over the course of 6 hours was powerful, and I knew after episode 3 or so that they were going to stick the landing with the suit and with the action and with those things. But Anthony Mackie saying "I'm Captain America" for the first time, I needed it to hit, and it so did. In the comic books, it's such a moment. In the world of the MCU, it's such a moment, and they really, really found a way to give that a new spin here while still acknowledging the beauty of that moment from the comic books. It's a really hard story to tell. It is a very bold story to tell. Again, Disney and Marvel just leaning in really impressed me, and I love that they reflected back to the Isaiah Bradley stuff. I love that they reflected back to all the conversation we've had and didn't just have it be purely an action spectacle. There was plenty of action in this episode. One of my actual negatives of this episode is that I wish it was 2 episodes, but they really leaned into how important him saying "I'm Captain America" was, and they did a lot of fun comic-y stuff around that. They had, back from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man era, you've got someone saying something and then someone correcting them, like a townsperson being like "Black Falcon," and then the other guy being like, "No, that's Captain America." That is a 20-year-old comic book movie trope that is used in a way here that means so much more. The 70s were an issue with characters black blank. It is a struggle for the comic books to modernize quickly enough to tell the message they need to be morally adjusting people's perspectives, while also not having every comic fan feel alienated, because you want people to feel like they're invested without feeling alienated. So acknowledging the problems of the way 70s comics were at times, while also giving us a little levity and yelling out the Captain America. Like those little beats, this episode really did very well. They really balanced all of those different things out well, and I was very impressed with it. I also think the Smithsonian moment was essential for the overall arc of where the show's going to go. I imagine season 2 is going to feature a lot more of the "I'm Captain America, that's the title I have. Stop calling someone else Captain America. Stop only seeing Steve Rogers as Captain America. Stop assuming this, that, and the other," because that's a lot of what the comic book arc is based off of. There's an entire arc called Sam Wilson Captain America that deals with him dealing with the racism of America while in the suit. He's only just gotten the suit. So there's a real opportunity for season 2 to be him wearing the suit and addressing that entire world. This season certainly did that, but he hasn't been Captain America. He was the guy that had the shield. Now he's Captain America, so he's going to be dealing with an entire country that's very torn, as we are. And unfortunately, whether this episode happens, the premiere happens in 2022, 2023, 2028, I'm sure that's a show that's still going to need to exist. I'm sure America is going to still need that lesson to be on weekly television screens. But what I think is really important is an entire generation. Think about people younger than us. I don't know how old you are. Internet, person, individual. But I do know that you know young folk that enjoy Falcon and Winter Soldier. Now those kids are going to grow up in a world where Captain America is black, where this conversation's been had, where this is not a strange thing. I love that. I love that there'll be less kickback like there was in the comics with, oh, you can't have a black Captain America, you can't do this, this, and this. There's going to be way less kickback, so we actually get to have a world where it is Sam Wilson Captain America. Ain't no thing. And it's a start. It's progress. It's making at least adjustments to things getting better. So I'm hopeful for that world, and I think the show, though rushed in this last episode, had a lot to cover and did cover it all. I would have preferred a 7th episode, so we'd have a little bit more of a denouement, of an epilogue. I would have preferred to see some of the ramifications, but considering how much they had to cover in episode 6, I think they did an incredible job covering what they had to do. Along with episode 2, I do feel like this episode was the most rushed. I do feel like they had a lot of ground to cover. I also feel like this suffered some from the rewrites with the original virus plotline. There was a lot of virus, antivirus, flag smasher plot that obviously changed due to our real life pandemic. When the show was filming pre-COVID, there was an entire subplot that only got a couple moments of reference in the rewrites and reshoots. You remember in episode 2, there was a moment talking about a vaccine, and obviously that's a very different conversation now. So I do feel like they had to really reframe the finale, and that maybe is why this felt so rushed and different. But overall, again, I think they did handle all of the important things that they needed to very well. Seeing 2 screen-accurate costumes in one episode made me very happy. I love that they didn't give us the costume reveal in episode 5. I appreciate the fact that we had a week of what's it going to look like? Because the Captain America costume that Sam wears is so iconic and so beautifully a combination of Falcon and Captain America while being uniquely Sam. You can immediately identify what it is, but it's also got a lot of, it's fun. It's a reference to the Winter Soldier outfit that the movie made popular, that was already a comic book outfit. It was a SHIELD outfit, but more popular through the Winter Soldier film. And then the Sam costume took notes from that, and now it's reflected back once again to the show with a character named Winter Soldier. So I really love the screen-accurate costume. They changed the gauntlets just a little bit. The belt is a little different, but overall it is almost exactly the costume right there, which I really loved seeing on screen. It looked great. I love the new Wakandan wings. I love the way the wings are great defensively and offensively. I love using the wings as a bit of a bolster with the shield. Using the shield in combination with the wings is beautiful. I really enjoyed how he fought with both of his tools simultaneously. And then all of the aerial stuff, the white on the suit, though comic accurate, in this medium translates beautifully to having a little bit more visual acuity. If you're flying around at night chasing a helicopter, it's going to be hard to see if you're just a deep blue, which the Winter Soldier Captain America outfit was. Adding all those white elements, adding all of that gives you, much like the Spider-Man game on PS4, adding all of that white to the costume gives you a lot more visual representation of the characters as they're moving. And if he's going to be flying, you got to be able to see him. And good for Anthony Mackie, man. What a moment that must have been to put on that suit to feel like Captain America. Anthony Mackie's been in this universe for a very long time. He loves superheroes. He's wanted to be the lead. You can see in any interview, he's just right there and ready to take it. And he was Captain America here. And it must have felt amazing to embody that in such a way. So that made me really happy. Also, at the end of the episode, we get U.S. Agent. We get the full-on U.S. Agent costume. We get him fully in the black with the red and white stripes. That I love that suit. The U.S. Agent suit represents a lot of the things we do wrong. The darkness of it, the symbolism of patriotism, but just askew. It has a villainous flair to it. It has a little bit of that to it, and I think it really works. Julie Louis-Dreyfus says, things are going to get weird. That character is going to make things weird. Things are going to get crazy very, very soon, and I'm excited for it because I think he's either going to lead the Thunderbolts or lead the Dark Avengers. I think that's what's happening is we're seeing all of that being gathered together to lead those things, and it's going to be great. I'm really excited about both screen-accurate costumes. I thought they were both delivered very well. Compliments to the costume designers. The way you translate those suits from page to screen is incredible because they should not work. We've lived through a lot of costumes not working. We've all lived through them bailing and just making everything leather. We've lived through multiple X-Men movies where they've teased comic accurate costumes for like the final scene, and then by the next movie they're like, nah, we're going with the plain Jane again. So with Marvel at this stage in its evolution, they've accepted that comic fans are the ones that are wanting the details in the suits, and that day-to-day fans don't mind that. So we've got this great cake and eat it too of comic book accurate costumes that are somehow translated beautifully. So I love that. The speech. We got to talk about the speech. The speech is what I want to feel. The speech was what I watch The West Wing for. The speech is what I listen to classic American politicians that are known for their oration and known for their pontification for. I love language. I love the way you can feel with someone phrasing and pontificating, which is now my word of the day. The way that they translate their emotions through words is what makes a good leader. Not the only thing, but a thing that makes a good leader. That's something that Steve Rogers had. That's something Chris Evans has. That's something they obviously have editing and music and other cues to make us feel more of. But the actual language itself is really important. The language of that speech is how I want to feel about America. It's not how I currently feel. But the beauty of that speech is that it was about working towards something, not accepting where we are. I don't accept where we are as a country. Neither does Sam. That speech was about growing into what we could be. It's about doing the work to become. It's not about accepting where we are. It's about pushing forward and becoming more. What Captain America is the guy that doesn't rest on things being fine. He's the guy that does the work. He's the guy that puts in the effort. He's the guy that doesn't believe in accepting this as it is. And that's what that speech was. And it dealt with in-universe and our-universe actual conversations. In-universe, it is a very important conversation about refugees, dealing with the blip, talking about housing, talking about millions of people displaced. I love that the blip is so important in Phase 4 because if half the people, half of all species disappeared, it would be a permanent problem. It would be a permanent conversation. We're 2 months into the vaccine. I dare you to make it 2 days out in public without someone saying like Moderna or Pfizer. And I say 2 days in case you live in the suburbs and there aren't as many people. If you're in the city, I give you 6 hours between you leaving the house and hearing someone talk about Moderna or Pfizer. If half of everyone was gone, it would be every conversation for quite some time if they suddenly came back. It is a world-shattering event to deal with refugees of all types all over the world. And the idea of one world, one people, I don't have a problem with. I think that we are one species. As humans, we are one thing. I don't understand nationalism. I don't understand why we think it's more important to have a line in the sand than to be brothers with our fellow man. I will never, hopefully, understand that concept. And it's really interesting having a show about Captain America. Two very strongly militaristic concepts, a captain and the country he works for, that he represents, saying, no thank you. This is about people. This is about humanity. This is about taking care of our people, not our nation's people, but our people. That's what the antagonists wanted, and just like with Black Panther, something that the hero learned from the antagonist and embodied. In Black Panther, T'Challa was able to see the merits in Killmonger's perspective, but not in his approach. His approach was wrong. It involved murder, it involved mercilessness, it involved not seeing nuance, just as this was not seeing nuance and not seeing ways around killing that Carly was doing, but still believing in the message. What Sam was able to do was embody the message that Carly believed in, but do it through his words and his actions and talk to the powers that be, but Carly never would have been listened to. Carly wasn't being listened to by those very same senators, and Sam had to become Captain America for them to even listen to him. Those same people weren't listening to him. At the beginning of the series, he couldn't get a loan because of many factors, but not the least of which was he wasn't respected, and a lot of that had to do with race, and a lot of that had to do with where they were post-blip. And now, him being Captain America, him being so well articulated in his defense and approach, was able to convince people that wouldn't have listened otherwise. And I think that's the power of a hero. That's the power of a leader. Also, the language in the speech, very well written. And it was basically a lot of Carly's point, and she died for it. And I don't think she would have minded that. But I do think that she was willing to be a martyr for the cause. And I think it's really important that she got what, at the end of the day, progress towards what she wanted. Whether or not those refugees are going to be taken care of as they should, we won't see yet. Whether or not they'll approach that conversation, I hope. But it is a very important real-world conversation and in-universe conversation. They address the fact that if after 5 years someone reappears in your home, whose home is it? That's a tricky conversation. We don't have anything nearly, our shit's complicated, don't get me wrong, but we don't have anything nearly that complicated as to what rights someone has after they reappear versus the people that have been living there for whatever. Like, these are messy things. You've suddenly got two people on one space. That's a conversation. And I love that they said it was complicated, because in real life, politics are complicated. In real life, nothing is black and white. Everything's shades of gray. So addressing that through a medium like superhero television, fantastic. Very big fan of addressing the complications of real world politics. That fight. All right, so we've talked about language, we've talked about nuance, we've talked about costume. Now let's talk about the Marvel action that was the finale. I personally did not like how rushed this episode was, but we're staying with the positive at the top of this review, and the positive was we got so much action due to how much they had to shoehorn in, and the fact that this was effectively the second half of the third act of a movie. The pro and the con of the way they're adapting Marvel stuff to television is it does feel like a 6-hour movie. That has a lot of perks. One of the negatives it has is I always enjoy the penultimate episode of these type formats because it's the third act, but it's all the inciting incidents, which leaves just the action for the final episode, which is fine for a lot of people, but for me, it just feels like all of the less subtle stuff is crammed into one thing, and it's just the roller coaster. I like the emotional resonance that the roller coaster makes me feel, and that usually happens in episode 5. Episode 5 is my favorite episode of the series. Now that all of them are out, I can safely say I believe episode 5 is the one that I have the most investment in, and that makes sense. If you look at 5 and 6 as one unit, that's a beautiful third act. But if you look at just 6, a lot had to happen just in the way of action to really close a lot of those doors. That said, the opening fight against Batroc the Leaper was everything I wanted. It was Batroc leaping. It was Sam Wilson fighting as Captain America using both his wings and his shield. It was him fully embodying what it meant to be Captain America. It was altruistic. The way he fought even felt noble. Like later on, he wouldn't hit Carly. He was only defense. He wasn't using the shield offensively. He was using it defensively. That was very specific and intentional. But even with Batroc the Leaper, he felt like Cap fighting. And not only is that great because one of our first fights, or the first fight in Winter Soldier, but one of our first fights in modern day Captain America was him fighting Batroc solo. Because Cap basically fought in the 40s, got frozen, fought with the Avengers. One of his first solo fights was in Winter Soldier, and it was against Batroc the Leaper. So there's a beautiful parallel there. But as a comic fan, even more excitingly, was the first person that Sam Wilson fought as Captain America was Batroc the Leaper in the comics. They actually were able to mirror the very first Sam Wilson Captain America fight. I'm a huge GSP fan. I have always been a big fan of his fighting. I've been a big fan of his personality. I'm a huge fan of his interviews. I'm a huge fan of what he sees fighting as and the philosophy behind it, the samurai mentality, the intelligence in the way he fights, the nuance in his worldview is incredible. He's a genius. The things he loves outside of the octagon are inspired. He's huge on dinosaurs and paleontology as well as sports nutrition and longevity. I was so impressed at how good of an actor he was through this series. He was great in Winter Soldier, but we only had him for like 5 minutes. He was so good here, balancing the French and the American. Obviously, he's bilingual, but like the acting in both was so inspired, and it added a worldliness to this whole show. If you're talking about refugees and you're talking about criminals the world over and you've only got Americans, that's not interesting. But this show was able to have people of every color. This was able to have people that represented all corners of the universe. It was able to introduce a new fictional world that wasn't near America in Madripoor. It was able to give us Baron Zemo and an entire culture through his limited backstory but very nuanced performance by Daniel Bruhl. It was able to do us all that. And then by having a henchman level speak in between French and English. It's just, I love when the world doesn't feel like it's all in New York. And a lot of times that's a comic book problem. This added a world to it. I'm a huge GSP fan as a person. Now I'm a big fan of GSP as an actor. I want to see him do more. I believed his motivation when he came back and saved her selfishly, Carly in this case, with the smokescreen. That's a great tactical move. The way he fought felt like Batroc the Leaper, but also would not have been possible for someone without the UFC background or stunt background, depending on who they hired. But he was able to do the stunts and the acting. And by the way, yes, he was shot, but we didn't see his body. We also didn't see him get shot. We heard it. If you don't see someone get killed in a comic book, they are not dead. It is rule one of comic books. If you don't see them die, they're not dead. And even if you do see them die, they're probably not dead. One of the things about comics that you can really do is a revolving door of death is real. So I do not think that's the last we see GSP, especially since we only heard the shot. I assume he'll come back. I hope he comes back. We are approaching my negatives of the show, but we're not there yet. My big thing, and to be honest, people complaining about stuff, even if I loved it, it does tarnish my experience. I hate when I read stuff and people just sound ignorant, or if they complain about stuff I don't personally feel that way about. So I always save my negatives for the end of my review. One, because I did overall enjoy this, but two, if you want to stay in like Cloud 9 happy-go-lucky place, I'm going to warn you before I go to my cons. That way you don't have anything from your boy tank your experience, because that's really important to me. I wish more people did that with their reviews. If I'm loving something and I walked out of it like a 10, I don't want to be watching a review and hear a bunch of negatives and be like, I guess I was wrong. I would much rather have it compartmentalized and separated. If I want the critical analysis, I'll fucking hang and wait for it. Closure for Isaiah. That moment, man, the Smithsonian sequence, the conversation with he and Sam at the house, the Eli tease that they keep going back to is so great for the Patriot. We got 3 episodes with the pair of them. I was afraid we'd get 1. We've got 3 full sequences that add to the show in so many ways. And we are so good at building monuments for conquerors, and we're so bad at building monuments for underdog heroes. Up until recently saw Columbus as this great American that found this country that did neither. He did not find this country, nor was he a good anything. We celebrated Columbus Day for a very long time, and some people still do. No judgment, well, some judgment. But as Americans tend to find a silver lining in not so great people, while also not identifying great people, and this was a fantastic example of us doing the right thing, building a monument to him and having a plaque which read, Isaiah Bradley is an American hero whose name went unknown for too long. Isaiah was one of a dozen African-American soldiers who were recruited against their will and without their consent for participation in human testing in pursuit of the super soldier serum. Most did not survive. The few who lived through testing were sent on secret missions during the Korean War. During the conflict, against all odds, Isaiah Bradley rescued his fellow soldiers and 28 other POWs from behind enemy lines. Ever fearful of the story from history, his family was given a falsified death certificate, and for decades, as the truth of his unflinching bravery was buried. I really appreciate how open and honest and real and powerful and wonderful and necessary that is. I don't see it as realistic. I love that we can live in a better world through comic books. I love that we can, even while dealing with very real subject matter and very grounded subject matter and very dark subject matter, we can still live in a world that makes us believe in happy endings. We need to believe in happy endings. Even if the world is dark as fuck, you need to have hope and you need to have sanity. I tweeted the other day, I'm taking a break from politics because I need to have fight in me. And I got so tanked by last year. I've gotten so exhausted from the experience of trying to be aware of so much darkness while not letting it consume me. I've consciously decided to take a breather. That's why happy endings are important, because we need to remember what we're fighting for. And I love me in Empire Strikes Back. I love me in Infinity War. I'm a sucker for dark endings. In Bruges, I love Irish filmmaking because often it ends dark, but there's a tongue-in-cheek darkness to it, and or a big blockbuster ending dark is usually interesting. There's some nuance there. And right now, with the world being as dark as it is, I need happy endings just for my own sanity. I don't believe we currently live in a culture that would do this. But I want to believe, just like with Sam's speech, that that culture is possible. I want to believe in what Sam Wilson sees this country as becoming. And I think that a statue like this, a piece of the Smithsonian that represents this, is what we could become. And I'd love to see that. I'd love to see us actually acknowledge our history in a way that we fix it as best we can in the present instead of ignoring it because it's the past. We have to learn from our history, not shirk it. We got to stop pretending that it didn't happen because, like, it's better now. It's really not. We won't learn from it if we ignore it. I really loved Isaiah's response, and I really loved how much it meant to Sam Wilson and how much fucking gravitas when Anthony Mackie beams with pride and humility and humbleness and does the right thing. There's such a powerful Captain America to that. And he's different from Steve Rogers. I do love how earnest his Captain America is and how much he believes in the future. We need that. That was one of the more important moments, I think, in the MCU because it's made by Disney. This is a arguably biggest conglomerate making entertainment right now, and they are owned by many people, and many people don't want to look at shit like this. And while Ike Perlmutter was doing shit, we didn't even get female villains. We had to wait for him to fuck off to get our first female villain, and now we have a bunch because it's almost like equality matters. So while Ike was there, we had things like Iron Man 3 having Killian be the villain out of nowhere instead of the very well set up Rebecca Hall. We had things like a lot of misogyny and one female in the event. A lot of shit was wrong. And I think Disney and Marvel looking at that and reshaping it and taking accountability and doing shit like this with this show, it's what I want to see. It's what I want to see in a major company. I would love to work for this Disney Marvel. I would love to see what they're doing with the next thing and the next thing and the next thing because of how bold this was and how proud I am of it and how I want to see more of it. I think it's a great step, and I argue it's a big step for a company to do something like this. I love that sequence, and I think it was really important. Down separate fights, I loved Cap in the sky with the helicopter while Bucky was on the ground with the arm, while Walker was pursuing the truck crash. That whole medley of the three Captains America when there's one new Cap. People that represent the concept of it. You've got the negative in John Walker, you've got the broken soldier in Bucky, and you've got the new person that I feel like represents what America can become, all doing different action and using their strengths. That was cool, man. I love seeing the arm get utilized so many ways. I love seeing the wings get utilized so many ways. I love our new power set with the Wakandan suit. I love how Bucky would fight differently on the ground than Sam would fight in the air, and I love they addressed all of that. I love me some motorcycle sequences. I love me some Dark Knight references, and there was a lot of Dark Knight flavor in that motorcycle sequence. I loved all of that, and I love that each of them got their own separate fights. I could dive into that longer, but we got more to talk about. Agent Carter as the power broker felt obvious, but I still enjoyed the reveal. I do think it's leading to Thunderbolts. I do think it's leading to Dark Avengers. I really like how she got called Agent Carter in reference to both her aunt, but also that's the power she now wields as a double agent. And in this case, she's going to be using that very immediately. I think she's either calling Zemo or someone else. I think it's going to be really interesting to utilize the character of Sharon in such a negative way, as such an antagonist. And I think that's going to be really fun going forward, having Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Sharon Carter pulling strings behind the scenes and doing all of that for nefarious things. I love the end with Zemo. I don't know if those super soldiers are actually dead. I don't know if those super soldiers, because the last thing they heard was someone saying that he was on their side, so that could have been a bait and switch. I think Zemo does think that he accomplished something. And it's interesting because that shows how much power Zemo has outside prison, and that shows where we're going to go with that character. But it also could be super soldiers had flag smashers on their side and they aren't dead. So I like that nuance. It's great because Marvel gets to do whichever direction they want. They can decide those super soldiers are gone and Zemo's in power here, or they can decide the Flag Smashers actually were able to trick everyone and they're not actually dead. You can go either direction, and it's very plausible with that ending. The Zemo ending made me very hopeful for all of his power in the raft. I like a good guy controlling stuff behind the scenes that seems like he's not controlling anything. I love that in mafia movies. I love that in organized crime movies. It's also terrifyingly accurate. A lot of people do have a lot of power from behind bars, and we see that with supervillains, and it's a very good comic book trope. So I really enjoyed the Zemo getting a moment in this finale, because I've loved Daniel Bruhl's performance this whole time, and this does mean he's coming back, which is very exciting. I love what this sets up. I love where Sam Wilson's going. I love that season 2 can be about the problem racists will have with a black Captain America. I love that we have addressed that throughout the season with him just being Sam Wilson, not Sam Wilson Captain America. The next season can be much, much more about him being Captain America, and I'm very intrigued by all of that. So I love what this setup. I love where it's going. MVP of the episode, Anthony Mackie. MVP supporting the episode, George St. Pierre. Now, my negatives. I don't love that Bucky didn't get his closure. We had an entire season set up, the two leads having different perspectives on America. One was dealing with race in America. The other was dealing with not being respected as a veteran and not being taken care of mentally and mental health in a very literal, direct way. The dude walked into his friend / grandfather of the man he killed, had 90 seconds in there, and then was like, well, I guess you'll have to deal with that information. We needed another episode. We needed more closure on that arc because they set it up for the entire series. And then, like, a look through a window and just one conversation. I didn't love that it ended very, very abruptly for Bucky, and I know why it had to, and I understand reshoots and I understand COVID, but if I'm going to say negatives, that is a negative for me. I did enjoy the fact that we went back to him with Anthony Mackie at the barbecue. We got to go back to the buddy cop setup. We got to go back to them being brothers. We got to go back to that entire sequence. I loved his ending there. I loved the ending of his story visually and chronologically. I just don't love that we feel like we got closure for Bucky in a way that felt justified for how big the setup was for it. I don't feel like we addressed the PTSD that well. I feel like him giving Steve's book was kind of not in character. I don't know that he'd give away something of Steve's. It does show that he doesn't idolize Steve as much. It does show that he doesn't put Steve on the same pedestal he has. But I still think Steve's his best friend, so we'd want that. And I do see the closure in, like, being done with the book. I'm just not sure if that's enough closure. Like, he'd still need to go to therapy. He still needs to work through stuff. He's not done with his problems. And I do see the symbolism. I'm not ignoring that. I just wanted more. I don't know how I felt about the immediate forgiveness of U.S. Agent. There was a look, like there was a nod between Falcon, now Cap, and Cap, now U.S. Agent. He would not have listened to a speech and been like, well, now I'm with you. And it just felt like that was what they were trying to say. That felt a little easy. I love the last sequence in episode 5 where he's building that suit up, but then he has this great janky shield that he uses and it doesn't do much. He's still a super soldier, so like he can fight and things, but it just seemed very convenient. I liked them all teaming up because you would need to meet to an end. They are all against the same enemy, but they wouldn't have trusted him not to kill anyone. And Bucky running along with him doesn't mean it's going to be safe for him not to kill people. There's just a lot of stuff with the U.S. Agent that really bothered me. U.S. Agent was one of our villains throughout the whole series. The Flag Smashers arguably were a little bit more nuanced, except in their murder, by them going for an idealized concept of unity. He murdered as well, and was going up for fascism and horrible ideals throughout the show, and then we kill, Carly dies, and I don't love that either, because I think Falcon not killing her obviously is good. Sharon Carter killing her is, she's a villain, power broker, that makes sense. But Carly dying and U.S. Agent being like, I'm gonna go do my thing now, I'm gonna go hang out with Veep, kind of bugged me, wasn't enough. I loved seeing him in the suit. I would have preferred him showing up, and it wouldn't have been as big of a moment, but him showing up in the suit with the new shield and being, I play by my own rules, and then him getting away. Like, him getting away after he rescues them in the truck and not being able to be apprehended makes way more sense than him standing and listening to the speech to me. That said, Wyatt Russell is such a good actor that I was still invested and I was still captivated by his performance. Wyatt Russell, I think, handled the situation. Like, he got the pages and went, I'll make this work. That's what you do as an actor. And he certainly did. He did that. The writing itself bothered me that he would do any of those things. That didn't feel like John Walker to me. That he has too much pride, I think. A detail I did love was that the metal was inside his shield as a moral and morale boost to see what he stood for, to give himself the boost. I love that being inside his shield. I love how they utilized that. I love the moment where it was necessary. That was fantastic writing. I did have a problem with U.S. Agent being, here we go, everything's fine. Also, Agent Carter being forgiven that easily does make sense from a storytelling standpoint, but her killing the refugee does send kind of a bad message to the story that I think the show is trying to tell. I think it undermines a lot of Flag Smashers nuance if a character gets killed and it's like, okay, and then all the other super soldiers get killed, like, okay. And I guess it's important for the super soldiers to have those ends tied up. But their message only reflected through Sam Wilson is really tricky. Now, it is reflected through Captain America because that's who's speaking those words that he now understands. But it's a tricky message for the everyday viewer going like, well, the bad guys are gone. If their message is one world, one people, for all of them to die is a tricky precedent and a tricky thing to kind of subconsciously say while someone like U.S. Agent gets to thrive. He's not in trouble. He's got his own little team forming. He's got a cool little super suit. It's a fine line to walk. So I really enjoyed this episode. I really loved this series. I think those are all my negatives. I felt like that had to be said. I usually lean positive, but I definitely had a hard feeling towards that. But I love where it sets up Cap to go, and I love what it sets up with US Agent. We'll see about how it lands going forward. Obviously, the Marvel Universe is serialized, so there'll be a lot of stuff after this. But I loved the episode overall. I think it was a beautiful way to conclude all this. I would have loved to have spent more time with some epilogue. The thing that makes action work is caring about the characters. I wanted to care more about how their stories resolved. I needed more Bucky. I would have loved more Cap addressing people dealing with him as Black in the suit. I would have loved a couple moments of that, even if it was just 2 more scenes. I think that will continue on in future series. I think that will be a continuing arc for story, and it is the trickiness with making a 6-hour movie versus a 6-hour TV show. It's a very different animal. This was the second half of the third act, and I understand why the pacing had to be this, but it is something that affected my experience of it. This has been the finale of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, Captain America and the Winter Soldier. Just a name change brings warmth and power to the MCU. And I'm really impressed with this show. I love the finale. I hope you loved it too. And I loved doing this with you these last 6 weeks. We'll be back for the next thing. I'll keep you all posted. Much love, gang. We'll see you soon. Bye.